Hi there, I'm Emma Hollywood and welcome to And the Show Goes On. I'm an actress and, like so many, I'm navigating the highs and lows of this unpredictable industry. But there's more to my story. I'm also living with an invisible illness. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's that the show really does go on. In each episode, we'll dive into the world of acting, uncovering the realities behind the glitz and the glamour. We'll talk openly about the challenges, from auditions to the art of managing it all with health challenges that don't take a day off. And I won't be alone. I'll be joined by incredible guests, actors, advocates, and others who share this journey. Together we'll share stories, laughter, insights, and inspiration to help you keep pushing forward no matter what. So join me every week on And the Show Goes On. Let's navigate this path together with resilience and a sense of humour, because no matter what, the show goes on. Hello and welcome back to And the Show Goes On. Thank you for joining me. In today's episode we have Frankie Turton. She's an actress and a folk musician. Frankie is mainly a theatre actor and recently she's done mostly kids theatre and puppetry. It was so lovely to talk to her. I hope you enjoy the episode. Hi Frankie, how are you?
Hi, I'm alright, thank you. How are you?
I'm really good, thank you. Can you start by telling the listeners just a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, sure. I'm Frankie Turton. I am a wheelchair-using actor, predominantly specialising in stage, but I do a bit of everything. And I'm also a folk musician.
Oh, amazing. So you've done lots of theatre, especially like children's theatre and puppetry. How did you get into acting and what made you want to become an actor?
So I've been acting since I was probably 5, I would say. I did my first film when I was 6 or 7, and I don't really remember it because I was very little, but the way my parents tell it is that I was like a very shy child, to the point where if I was like in a restaurant and someone started having happy birthday sung to them, even if it like wasn't at our table, I would cry and hide under the table
Oh,
because
God.
I like associated hearing the sound with people looking at me. And then for some reason, while I was doing like my school nativity, when I was like 5, it was one of those things that's like every child gets a line. And kind of as the rehearsal process went on, kids kept being like, I don't want to do my line, I don't want to do my line. And the teacher would say, okay, put your hand up if you want to do so-and-so's line. And for some reason, I kept putting my hand up. And so it got to the point where I was actually ended up having my role changed from just like being an angel to being angel narrator.
Oh, nice.
Because I'd like taken so many kids' lines. And that kind of spiraled from there. And then apparently we did the show, and when it had finished, my mum asked me how I'd found it, and I said, I don't know, I feel like I didn't get to do much. So I'm not sure really what clicked, but something just clicked in me while I was doing that, and it kind of spiraled from there. And ever since, it's been the biggest thing I've been passionate about.
Oh, nice. How did you go from like enjoying that nativity to you wanting it to become a career?
Um, I'm not really sure. After that nativity, I like started going to like drama groups and Amdram stuff, and I think it just became such a big part of my life that I just, from a very young age, couldn't see myself really doing anything else. And I was a child actor in that I was also doing professional stuff and that kind of thing. So I got a taste of the kind of professional side of the industry very early, and I think it just was already something I was so passionate about and enjoyed doing, and that it just kind of was like it made sense for me to kind of go forward and have that be what I do forever.
Yeah. How did you get into because I know you do different types of acting, but I know that you your previous jobs have been like puppetry and kids theatre. Did you just kind of fall into that, or is it something that you specifically wanted to do?
No, it's just been something that I've kind of fallen into
Yeah.
recently. It just has been a coincidence that my last few jobs have been that sort of family theatre with puppetry. But it is very fun, and I think it's really nice to know that these companies that are making shows and stuff for children are looking to kind of diversify their cast and show visible disabilities on the stage, because I think it is such an important thing to introduce.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, speaking about disability, could you just tell my listeners a little bit about your disability and how it affects you?
Yeah, so I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and basically that means that it affects all my joints are kind of, my ligaments and tendons are too slack, and it affects all the soft tissue in my body, which means that I have very unstable joints and chronic pain and that kind of thing, which has led to me using a wheelchair to kind of negate that.
Yeah. Um, how has it affected like your job? Because I know that theatres can be quite like notoriously inaccessible. So
Mm-hmm.
how have you kind of navigated that and how have you overcome any obstacles regarding that?
It's very interesting because I only started using a wheelchair when I was 18, I think. And although Ehlers-Danlos syndrome is something you're born with, it only really disabled me to this extent when I was 17. So I had a lot of experience in the industry as, for all intents and purposes, someone, a non-disabled person. So suddenly, well, yeah, fairly suddenly becoming disabled and it being so different was a real sort of shock. Um, and yeah, it's been very interesting. As you said, a lot of theatres are not accessible, um, but I have found that like within the industry, when you find companies that are willing to put the work in to work with disabled actors and hire access consultants and really think about that kind of thing, it really does make the world of difference and can be the difference between being able to do a job and not being able to.
Yeah, 100%. Like, because I know you work for Tall Stories
Mm-hmm.
for Elmer the Elephant, and I did some research and development for them, and they were just like so amazing.
Yeah,
Like the whole like crew at Tall Stories are just like really, really lovely. Um, have you like faced any ableism in your job, and how have you kind of overcome that?
I definitely have. I'm very lucky in that I've yet to, fingers crossed, experience anything particularly extreme. But I
Yeah.
have definitely attended auditions where you've consulted beforehand. Is this an accessible thing? Is this something I could go? And then you show up and they were clearly not prepared to accommodate for a wheelchair user. I have attended auditions where they kind of have an approach to it where it's like they're just gonna kind of pretend it doesn't exist, which I kind of see what they're trying to go with that, but it just doesn't work. And so, there was one particular audition I attended a few years ago where beforehand I contacted them and said, is the show accessible? Will the audition be accessible? Or this kind of thing. And they were like, yeah, of course, of course. And then I showed up and the first thing they got us to do was salsa dancing,
Oh
which
God.
very much is possible if you are, if it is adapted, but they
Yeah.
didn't adapt a single thing about it. And a lot of it was sort of going around the room in a circle and like doing arm movements, and I was kind of there like, you kind of have to pick one or the other. It's not so
Yeah.
I've definitely experienced a lot of sort of things like that where it's not necessarily overt ableism, and it isn't coming from a place of hatred. It's just coming from a place of pure ignorance. They just don't think about it and don't think about the logistics of working with a disabled person and just don't know how to navigate it.
Yeah. How do you deal with it in those situations? Like, do you feel confident telling, the producers or whoever that, it's not suitable for you? Or how do you feel about doing that? Because I know from my experience, I'm still very much like, I don't like telling people about my needs because I don't want to shoot myself in the foot, but I do know that I need to do it.
Yeah, I'm very much in the same boat. I will sometimes, if I manage to kind of work up the courage, I'll be like, I can't do that. But
Yeah.
I am definitely getting better at it. But yeah, I still sometimes have a tendency to just be like, okay, and then afterwards be like, I should have said something. That wasn't right. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's something I'm trying to work on, because it is very important that, you know, you assert your needs, and that you let, you know, producers and directors and stuff know when they are asking something that is not possible, because, you know, how are people ever going to learn and adapt if, you know, you're not pointing out when they are doing things that aren't accessible and adaptive.
Yeah, I think it's like the worry that you're going to come across as a diva, but
Mm-hmm.
it you just have to say it, don't you? Because otherwise you're just going to put yourself in a really sticky situation.
Yeah.
You said like at the start you do is it a folk musician as well?
Yeah.
How did you get into that?
So again, I've always been very much into music and that kind of thing. It kind of comes with the territory of doing a lot of sort of Amdram musical theatre as a child. But yeah, I don't really know how I kind of fell into songwriting and that kind of thing. I think it just, again, when I was a child, I would play around on a keyboard and write songs and that kind of thing, and it just sort of spiraled from there. And I find it's a really nice, I find it a really like healthy way of sometimes working through quite difficult things and difficult emotions, because it's sort of like a diary, but I feel like you can convey things through music that you can't easily convey through pure words sometimes.
Yeah. Do you find like with your music it intertwines well with your acting?
Oh yeah, definitely. I Yeah, I think it definitely does. There's a lot of jobs I've got where they are looking for somebody who can play instruments and that kind of thing. So it's definitely helpful in that way. And I think that having written music myself, um, it sometimes means I feel I can sometimes connect with music in shows and stuff a little bit better, because I kind of know the process of writing it. So I kind of get the like, I guess, the things that go on behind the scenes with it.
Yeah. Yeah, amazing. Going back to like being a disabled actor and specifically like with like the kids' theatre shows and the puppetry that you've done, it must be like really rewarding to like be a wheelchair user on stage, especially like in front of children and showing that, you know, you can be an actor even if you're in a wheelchair. Did you find that rewarding?
Oh yeah, definitely. It's so rewarding, and I think it's so important. I think that, you know, the more we expose children to things like disability in a like fully non, I don't know how to describe it, like in a way that isn't even necessarily about disability. It's just like this person is disabled, and that's not a plot point.
Yeah.
They just are, and they're doing other things. I think it's so important to do that, to normalize it, and to give children, because you know, children have questions, and it's just part of, you know, natural curiosity. And I think it's a good way to kind of open up those conversations for parents, because it can sometimes be, if you don't, you know, really have much experience with disability, it can be quite a hard conversation to open up with a child, and sometimes it might be quite hard to answer those questions. But if you know, if you've taken your child to the theatre and there is an actor in a wheelchair, it gives that child an opportunity to ask those questions in a way that isn't like, it's, there's still a kind of distance, if that makes sense. It's not a family member or a friend or a classmate that they're asking these questions about. There's a kind of distance there of like, well, this actor has, and so there's not that kind of potential emotional tie-in
Yeah.
with that type of thing. And I think it's also so important for disabled children to see themselves represented, and especially again to see themselves represented in a way that is not about disability necessarily, but just is a disabled person going on an adventure, or, you know, hunting, you know, like trying to find an elephant in a jungle, that type of thing. The most recent show I did, which was with a company called She Productions, who predominantly go around libraries and schools. So you get to see, you get a much more kind of intimate experience with the audience, because it's much smaller audience sizes, and it's very like relaxed performance. It's not on a stage with stage lights and that kind of thing. You can see the audience fully. And it was really rewarding when there would sometimes be a disabled child in the audience, and you just got to really see their reaction to it. Like, there was one particular place we went to where there was a young girl in a wheelchair, and as soon as I came out on that stage, her face just lit up, and it was really special. And then afterwards, she came to say hi, and her carer told me that it's the first time she has seen a wheelchair user in something like this, like in a show, doing this kind of thing. And it really hit me then that like it really is so important to just allow children to see people like them doing something that is fun and interesting and dynamic and that kind of thing.
Yeah, 100%. Like you said at the start as well that, you'd get questions from non-disabled children,
Mm-hmm.
like, kids are just curious. How do you deal with those questions? And what advice would you give to like um parents to kids who like, because I just feel like sometimes like parents can feel a little bit awkward if like, for
Mm-hmm.
example, if I'm in my wheelchair and then a kid will like look at me and then the parent will be like, oh, don't look at them.
Yeah.
How do you think it should be approached differently in your opinion?
I mean, I think it definitely varies from person to person. And I think for parents, it is important to know that, you know, disabled people don't inherently owe you an explanation or to like owe you to humor your child in these questions. But I also think, for me personally, I don't mind answering questions from children because I know that for children, it's never coming from a place of disgust
No.
or hatred. It's just purely coming from a place of curiosity because children haven't, they've not lived for very long yet, so they haven't seen that much. And so when they see something that is something they've not really come across before, they have questions about it. And I think as long as your child is, you know, um, like as long as they're being polite and that kind of thing, I don't think there's that much harm in it. And I think as a parent, it's important to not, as you said, when children do have these questions, to not immediately be like, no, you can't do that, because
Yeah.
all that does is, I understand that from a parent, you're trying to, tell your child not to, I'm trying to think how to describe it, not to like make a big deal out of
Yeah.
disability, but in a way you're kind of doing the opposite, because what you're doing there is making a big deal out of disability in a negative way. You're making it something that you look away from, you don't address, you don't kind of interact with, and that then is the type of thing that instills a kind of fear of difference in your child. I think that it is important to allow these topics to come up and just to address to treat them with the same respect and politeness that you would treat a child's question about anything else.
Yeah, and I think that's why it's really important to have disabled like actors in the media, especially with like kids shows, because then you're exposing the kids to disabled people more naturally,
Yeah.
and it won't be so shocking. Um, Going back to just like being an actor in general, do you have like a favorite job you've done or a specific moment in your career that really stands out to you?
Oh, that's a good question. um I'm not sure. I love this career so much that every job I do always feels like a real treat, because I feel like on every job I do, I have this moment where I'm like, oh my god, this is what I do for a job. Like this is what is my career. Um, I think just every time I get to speak with anybody who has ever been impacted by anything I've done, as I said, that child and her carer and anything like that, I think it always just really hits me that like art is such a impactful thing, and getting to do something within the arts is such a special career and such a special job that I'm just always so like a little bit in awe that I get to do it.
Yeah. Um, What changes would you like to see in the industry to make it more accessible, especially like, you focus more on theatre acting. What would you say is important changes that need to be made?
I think, I mean, I suppose the most big and obvious one is just more theatres literally being accessible for the actors. I would say a lot of, not most theatres now are accessible for audience members, and that is obviously lovely and a great change. But so many of them are still totally inaccessible for actors that it sometimes feels a little bit like, okay, so you don't want to put the harder work in order to be able to accommodate that. I would also just say, like, the industry as a whole to not be afraid of disability and casting actors with disabilities. It requires perhaps a little bit more work than a non-disabled actor, but it is not harder work.
Yeah.
And I think it doesn't take that much energy and resources and time to put that little bit more effort in to be able to accommodate a disabled actor. And I just wish more theatre companies would do it, would just not see it as a hurdle or a roadblock, just see it as something a little bit extra.
Yeah, 100%. What advice would you give to not only actors in general, but disabled actors who have just started out in the industry, who want to get in the industry?
I would say don't let the people who are afraid of disability and are worried about it and do see it as a hindrance, don't let them define how you see yourself. I think it's so important to know that you are not a burden, you are not a hindrance, and that you can contribute to a show just as much as an able-bodied actor, and that there are a handful of people who will not know how to deal with it, but that is a them problem and not a you problem. And you just need to be, I suppose it's not even about confidence, it's just about knowing that disability is not a bad thing and it is not a thing that should be seen as a problem.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you so much for speaking to me. Where can my listeners find you? Like, do you have social media that they can follow you on?
Yes, so I have an Instagram, which is Frankie E. Turton. And I also have a YouTube channel where I put out my music, and that is Frankie BXBY.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Frankie, for talking to me. I absolutely loved having you on. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye.